Driving. Melanie and Diana had been driving for days together. Recently married, the women had been traveling from Florida to California on a long and surprisingly stressless honeymoon. Somewhere in Arizona, possibly New Mexico, the two had been driving for quite some time along a dusty stretch of road. Miles and miles of nothing stretched in front of them as they plowed down the deserted highway whose number both of them had forgotten. All they knew was that they were headed northwest along it. In the day, the road stretched on with nothing but dust and rock on either side, while ahead of them was a range of short, squat mountains that they intended to cross. But now, after they had driven for so long, the sun had gone and abandoned the dust, the rocks, and the mountain to be devoured by near total darkness on a moonless night. Only the smallest bit of starlight illuminated the girl's world. Both talked and let the time pass as they drove. They were in no rush, but slowly, they began to wonder when this stretch would end. Shouldn't we at least start feeling an incline? They thought. But white line fever often sinks in without you noticing it. Besides, they were enjoying their long overdue and well-deserved time together as wife and wife. As they drove and drove, their highway hypnosis finally gave way, as they both saw it, and a dreadful feeling began to seep in, replacing the happy and carefree feelings that they had felt along this trip. Each time they noticed it, Melanie would grab Diana's hand and squeeze it, a comforting motion to assuage the worry and dread nailed into them each time they saw the fuel gauge drop and drop. They had been driving for so long. They should have gotten there already. And that's when they realized something was wrong. Did they misjudge the length? Did they not fill up before? Whatever it was, it just didn't add up. And like the inevitable swing of the Reaper's scythe on all our mortal coils, the car began to slow as the gas that had turned to fumes turned to nothing. And with a crunch on the gravel ground, the car stopped. Checking both their personal phones and Diana's work cell phone, they found, not much to their surprise, that signal was non-existent out here. It wasn't really a shock considering that they had suffered dead spots often on the drive thus far. So, the conversation began as to what to do. Stay in the car, or walk forward. And then a compromise was reached. They would walk forward a bit to see if by some stroke of luck there was a sign of civilization close by, or even perhaps a roadside assistance call box. Granted, it was nearly pitch black out, with but a small bit of ambient light. The road was a black stretch touched by oceans of deep purples and blues dotted with shadows. It was still rather warm outside, and they both felt that the fresh air could be good for them. They did their best to make fun of the situation by joking and being playful, in order to ignore the possibilities of their unfortunate situation. The two had trod for but a few minutes before the car was out of sight. They then discussed whether they should turn around and go back, and each time they did, the discussion ended with, just a bit farther. Just a little bit longer. And so they went on, farther and farther, wrapped up in their quest and in each other, not noticing much else, until it snuck up on them. Clouds, thick rolling clouds spreading across the sky, blotting out the already feeble starlight with their inky black. And that's when they decided, go back. Oh, we have to go back. They both agreed as the last bit of starlight was voided out, but as they walked back towards the car, they realized that it was far too late for such a choice. Blackness stretched before them, behind them, above them. The only way that they even knew the other was there was by their clasped hands and the other's breathing. We'll eventually get to the car, they thought. Just keep a straight line and we'll get there. On and on they walked, but nothing broke up the monotonous pitch black. Worry, panic, fear, and frustration seeped into their voices. Only the fact that they held each other's hands throughout it and knew that the other was there kept them from devolving into abject loss and hopelessness. It felt like an eternity. And then, light. A small flicker of light springing to life in short bursts, then finally stabilizing to a constant one. It appeared to be a roadway light, which meant that something was there, or at least nearby the area. At least, they hoped so. As they got closer, they noticed that the night was so dark that the light barely illuminated the ground beneath it, and it didn't even shine on its own post. But they ran to it regardless. If nothing else, they could at least sit below it until daybreak. They both ran up to it, and underneath that feeble light, they embraced, not even realizing that the ground was wet. Though it had not rained. They lost themselves in a celebratory and relieved kiss under that small light. So relieved, in fact, that they didn't even mind the very strong smell. Suddenly, the light bobbed a bit. They both looked up, as two bulbous, cloudy white eyes were revealed by the moving light. The tongue they were standing on moved. The light went out, and the wives screamed, holding each other, as the monstrous jaws they had walked into slammed shut.